Hello, everyone. It is once again my pleasure to bring a special guest uh, to uh, this space today. It is a space where I get to meet a lot of different people. Because what I always like to do is to seek to engage the best minds among us in dialogues that not only challenge us, but also help us to take some introspective looks at ourselves and the world that we live in. It is my hope that in doing so, we can always do our best to try to bring change in the small spaces that we occupy. And by so doing, enlarge our interactions with the world and increase our footprints, especially as that is important for those of us who like to make the world a better place. So it is my special pleasure to welcome to this space Ms. Yurilka Hernandez, who is a clinical social worker licensed and does a lot of remarkable work that we'll be hearing about today. She's a clinician. She's also an administrator. And in that role, she serves as the Assistant Vice President of Acacia Network, a community association of progressive Dominicans. But in addition to that, she is an author and she is a professor who has taught many graduate classes and has also supervised several interns who are in the process of getting their master's degrees in social work. So Miss Professor Yurilka Hernandez, it's good to see you. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here. Thank
And
you for.
happy to you. So let me ask you, why did you choose to become a social worker?
Well, I'm from the Dominican Republic, and in the Dominican Republic, we don't have the field of social work. There is nothing um, that we can compare to, unfortunately, still today. And when I got into this country, I was taking classes of liberal arts, trying to get, to learn the field and trying to decide where I wanted to go and be. And in one of those classes, I met one of my mentors, Professor Twiggs, an African-American teacher who invited me to tour the shelter where he was working at back in 2004. And it was very shocking to me when I went to the shelter. And he said, you are good at human services. Why don't you become a social worker? And I was like, what is a social worker? And he explained me this beautiful tree that has all these leaves and everything that you can possibly do with a social work degree. And although I didn't understand the magnitude of this field back then, I learned very quickly to have an appreciation for it, especially when I saw the type of people that he was working with at that time. So I continued taking classes that were geared towards social work. And next thing you know, I was graduating with a bachelor's degree in social work from Lehman College. And I got into NYU for a master's. Never in a million years I thought that I was going to go for a master's. I thought, bachelor's degree was going to get me further enough. And, here we are, loving and living through social work.
You know, it's interesting just listening to you talking about how you came here and to this country and how you really didn't know what social work was until you met that person who I'm sure you'll never forget because that person planted that seed. I think that many of us immigrants can have this same story. But one of the things that I like about you is the fact that you have not forgotten where you came from. And I actually remember that I read something about you some time ago where it had to do with the fact that a graduate student in your class you were teaching a master's degree class, and a graduate student talked about how proud she was that she had a professor who was Dominican. And I think your response to that was you were excited and you said representation does matter.
Yes. I think the biggest thing in our field for any immigrant is to find representation, is to find people that look at us, speak like us, and most importantly, are in position of power that we can relate, that we can say, hey, okay, I can make that, or even if I cannot make it, I know there is a place where I can go, and somebody who looks like me is going to understand my story. So that particular student had an accent like myself, she was immigrant like me and living this life. And in this college, there essentially is a very prestige college, similar to me going to NYU. So my story resonated with her. And then I saw myself in her because I also went to school late in life, right? I didn't go in my teens. I was in late 20s, getting my master's and working full time. So my immigrant story is my identity, is part of who I am.
You know, NYU School of Social Work, Silver, is one of the top social work schools.
Yes.
So I want to ask you, as an immigrant, who just went through the undergraduate program in social work, what was it like for you being a student at NYU? What was that experience like?
So NYU was my top school because it had a clinical track, and I was very interested in being a clinician. So I read everything. NYU is the top school for that, the Silver School. Interesting enough, only 2 people of my graduating class got into NYU that year. And it was another minority Black girl from Barbados and myself. And I was very ecstatic. I was so excited that I was going to go to this great school. And everything was going to be so great, right? But then I got there and I was alone. There was only a few of us, and it was very impactful for me and very hard to find community, especially because I came from school like Lehman College that is very diverse, is very full of life and people. And in this college, there was nobody that looked like me, that speak like me, that sounded like me. There were no teachers, no Hispanic teachers, no Black teachers. There was only one, Professor Darcy. And that was it. And she didn't have tenure back then. So, it was very isolating and it was very lonely. And actually in the book that I wrote, I wrote about that, about my loneliness at NYU. As much as I loved the school because it was exactly what I wanted and what I needed, and it gave me opportunities and open doors, it was extremely isolated and very lonely to be there. Like Drake said, the top can be very lonely.
Right, Drake. Right. So I want us to talk about your book a little later, and I also really want to talk about that book that you and a bunch of other female Latinx, social workers wrote, which really continues to make significant waves.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about that later. But I want you to show us your baby.
Oh, here it is, my baby.
Wow. How many months old now?
6 months.
So tell us, now you are a clinician by training, and you are the assistant vice president of your company where you work. So what is it like balancing your roles as a clinical practitioner with being an administrator and being a professor and being a mother of a young child?
Well, obviously, this is a perfect sample how you balance things in. So being a clinician still, because I do have a company that I run, I have a group practice, right, where I have multiple therapists of color to serve the community. and myself, I do have patients as well, and having a full-time job, and then having a full-time baby, and being a first-time mom is extremely hard, but it's doable. It's just that it requires a lot of scheduling, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of family support.
This
There
is
is,
your complaint.
yeah, there is absolutely nothing that you can achieve if you don't have family support. And thankfully, I have great friends and family that have been able to come together to help me, to support me, to teach me, because motherhood is a whole new field in itself. And I always have respect for people that be like, I'm a mom and I'm here in school and I'm doing all these things. I was like, wow, I cannot do that. But now I'm doing it and I'm like, oh, you can. It just requires a lot of support and a lot of whole handlings from your friends and family to understand that it's a new chapter in that you're going to have a lot of questions and you're going to miss a lot of events, you're going to miss a lot of things, and all that is going to be fine.
Right. The company where you're vice president is different from your own company.
Yes.
And so I want us to talk a bit about that because there are some people watching us who are in social work school. And one of the things that you and I know is that the profession is so vast that you can do many things.
Yes.
And you are a good example of that. So what I want to also hear is not just how you balance all of these roles, which you've talked to us about, but how you have met the challenges, that come with the opportunities that is a social work profession accords all of us who want them.
Yes. So I call this the profession the treat of life. Social work is literally a treat of life, and it gives so much away to all of us. One of the things that has happened is that my company is one of the largest non-for-profit organizations in your state, in Puerto Rico as well. They are vast, servicing the community, and they have a lot of great programs throughout. I've been there for 10 years, and I started as a clinical social worker back then, shortly after graduating from NYU. And I went through my ranks of being a CFE instructor. I went to be a supervisor administratively, then a clinical supervisor. Then I was a director, and then I was an administrator. And about a year ago, I went to my CEO and I was like, I want my own portfolios. I want to build this with you. Give me the chance. Let me show you as as an executive what I can do. And she took a chance on me, and she made me an AVP. And now a year later,
assistant vice president.
yeah, and now I've been fostering that. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, many people like myself, like you, were looking for therapists that understand culture, but also understand the need to have people that look like us. And I didn't find anyone who were taking insurance, who was taking, who was not asking for like $400 for a session. It was extremely hard. And what I ended up doing is in 2021, I opened my own practice, right? Because now I'm a licensed clinical social worker that can treat people at a different level. And I had a clinical training to be able to do this. And I opened a practice, individual, right? And then I have colleagues and friends, and the demand was so big for services that I couldn't handle, but I felt bad about turning people away. So I started, bringing people that I knew, interns that I had previously. Two of my staff were my interns that I got very early on, and they went continue their schools and got the licenses. So they joined my team, and then a few more other therapists joined. So now we're a team of 6. We speak Spanish, English, Portuguese, always expanding our language so we can continue reaching. And it's a group practice that works collectively to help the community.
Oh, that is great. I actually was reading a bunch of things about you. It's not that I don't know a lot of these things. I know some of these things, but I will tell you that one of the things that fascinated me that continues to fascinate me, has been your authorship. You know, the books that you have been part of writing. And do you want to speak about that? And then as you talk about your writing, and, I also want you to talk about that book about Latinx, the social workers. And you know, I know some of your co-authors. You know, I know some of yes, some of them are really my close friends. And it's kind of interesting how small the world is. And when I see them and I see pictures of you and them, and I say, oh, you know her, and you know her, and you know her. Right. So I also want to hear from you how you met them, how the experience of writing has been like for you as a social worker. And, you know, part of the balancing act is this, being an author, a professor, a clinical practitioner, and someone who is very engaged in your community, an administrator. And you and I are talking on a day when, because of the weather in New York, your nanny had to leave early to go home. You know? And now here we are, you know, and the baby is also my guest.
Yes.
But respond to that question about that has to do with your writing.
Yeah. So the book came about in support to the Latino Social Work Coalition. Actually, I am a board member. I forgot to add that. And this organization has been around for about 24 years now. It was started by Maria Girones. I actually was in a scholar. I received an award from them. They helped me when I was at NYU to pay for books and other needs that I had as, you know, no income person. And when I graduated, I stayed in contact with them, and I always supported the cause. And then when I started working at Acacia Network, they are a big donor for them and supporter. So I was able to continue going to the gala and being engaged with the services. And the idea for this book is to create funding to continue the work that the coalition is doing. So one of the many involved members, Erika Sandoval, she started the idea with Maria Girones about having a collective to talk through our experiences as immigrants, as social workers, as people who are trying to break it through. And one thing that we found when we all wrote a chapter is that every story was the same. Literally, like, we went through the same struggles, we went through the same issues, we faced a lot of the pushback, but we all continue doing the work because of the love that we have, right? I personally remember reading the president of the coalition's book, Luisa Lopez, who talked about her struggles, the fertility issues. And I was shocked when I read her chapter because she's a Dominican woman of color, and people don't talk about that, in being infertile and not having the opportunity to have a baby and all that stuff. And it was like, wow, you know, you're really putting your heart out there so everybody can see. And her chapter actually helped many of my clients that I was treating at the time. And I was like, you know what, read this chapter. Women who were feeling shame, women that were feeling, you know, all kind of things about not being able to have a baby. I read the chapter for Lara Quiros, which was very impactful as well. From Paula, from Madeline, who expressed such an aggression in the field, and how they came up today. These are women that are powerful, women that are, you know, heroes in their own way, and they carry themselves with such a dignity, and they continue carrying the social work to what it is today. I feel that in the writing, me, myself, I'm a lot more conservative than most people. And my story, as I did talk about my experience in NYU because it was one of the most shocking cultural things that I experienced moving to this country, I needed to assimilate very quickly, learn a new language and that stuff, and that was expected. But going to such a place with such a prestige and recognition and being almost the only Latina in every room of people of color, it was very shocking and impactful. Especially when the shooting for oh my God, a Ferguson shooting happened, that they sent an email blast to the students. It only went to like 8 African American students, male. And I'm like, you only have 8 people and you don't see this as a problem? That you only have 8 people in New York City? The diversity is lacking. So the writing of the book really brought these emotions up to life. For me, it brought those memories back that I had 15 years ago. And all because we think that we're evolving, right? But then we see the things that are happening today. And then no matter how much we work, especially in the field of social work, when you are promoting equality and you are promoting, self-empowerment and you are protecting a community, there is so much more work to be done. And it takes you completely back. How I met, yeah, go ahead. How I met these women.
No, go ahead.
How I met these women. A lot of them I already knew from LinkedIn. A lot of them I connected in events prior to the pandemic. A lot of them I met from teaching, from being in the coalition, from school, from participating in trainings with them. Because when you said it's a very small world, it's not that it's a small world. It's a very small representation of Latinos and Blacks in the field. That is only so many little of us doing it that you know everybody. You cannot miss one of us.
Yeah, why is that so? I just talked now about how some of your co-authors, I know your book, the second volume was published,
Yeah.
right? I'm listening to you and I'm saying to you, wow, you're actually talking about really powerful people.
Mhm.
I would like to have Dr. Sandoval as a guest here. And she's another powerful person. And you're talking about it, and you just said it's not that it's a small one, but the representation is small. It actually makes sense because if you think about those co-authors, and I can just reel down names of people, co-authors who are my friends, and you didn't even know they were my friends, and they didn't know that you knew me, and we're talking about Dr. Kiros, who has, very, she and I have a very close relationship I've had for many years. We're talking about Dr. Caroline Peguero Spencer, and now we're talking about Dr. Sandoval. We're talking about a bunch of people. We're talking about you. So how is it then that it's such a small space that so many of us know each other? Why is it so small? Why is it that there aren't enough people of color coming into this profession?
Ooh, don't get me started because let me start with this. Um, I would say this and it's controversial, but I'm okay with that. I love being controversial because that's like half of my career. So one of the things is that I personally believe their schools are not doing, higher education schools, graduate schools are not doing a good enough job in recruiting us. The only reason why I applied to NYU, not only because I actually thought it was like, a top school, I believe I couldn't get in, although I had a 3.8 GPA graduating. I had honor roll all through my undergrad. But I didn't think I was good enough. And I remember Professor Quinn, she said, did you apply for school already? I was like, oh, no, I was telling her that I was afraid. She's like, apply. You never know. And I was like, exactly, I never know. But they didn't go, right? And they didn't do like open house. They didn't go to the school and try to recruit us. They didn't come to the Bronx school trying to look for students. Because if they did, a lot more people probably would have been motivated to apply to their schools. And I understand that we are becoming very selective, right? Because the more selective that you are, the harder you are. It's like dating game, the more harder you try, the more people want you and things like that. But what it's doing is a huge disservice to our community You know, when the AWB results came out, I wasn't surprised. I don't know who was surprised that Blacks and Latinos are the least passing the exam. The exam is not meant for us. It has never been meant for us. Extremely hard to pass an exam for a person who English is a second language, and the exam reads like a ask for textbook. Like who is exam for? Not for me. No, it's meant for somebody who was born and raised here with a very good education, a private school, right? Schools are not doing enough. And although we having a lot of new theme of color in these schools now, their hands are really tight to what they can do, right? It's not much who they can bring in. And a lot of them are focusing on continuing the financial stability of the schools rather than bringing talent. So if you ask me why such a small pool, especially in New York City, there's such a diverse state, it's the lack of recruitment from schools. They're not doing a good job. They're not engaging to, these organizations that I've been sitting on the board for the last 3 years officially, does incredible work to support students. We fundraise all through the year trying to get money so we can help students and bring it into the field. Right now, we literally have to be selling practice to people because a lot of people now are becoming social workers, not to practice. They want to be coach. They want to be in administrative positions. They want to go into private practice. So the problem with that is that you're going into private practice, but you're leaving a whole community behind underserved. So it's not a lot of people serving the community.
Right. I was just in a meeting today where I talked about the importance of making sure that that macro practice is taken along, that everyone just doesn't do clinical practice where we forget the macro practice where the profession actually began from. But you just made a very good point about the fact that some social work schools now have deans of color. NYU is one of those now, right? That now has a dean of color. But you also said it really doesn't make a big difference because they have to worry more about the financial stability of the programs. But what I'd like you to talk about now is the other side of that. Where do we see the effects of not having many people who look like you, who look like me, in this profession? How do you relate that to the fact that people of color are not seeking mental health care when they need it?
I mean, we have been doing great strikes, I would believe, in the last 3 years, 4 years since the pandemic. A lot of more men and a lot of more immigrants are engaging in therapy. However, the stigma is still there, right? We're not training people properly. And I'm the first one to say that, right? When we graduate from school, we should be graduating with all the tools. Schools want to say that they are teaching competence, but where the competence training is coming from, where this is, are you understanding culture as a whole? Because they are not doing that. So the problem with that is that people, why would you want to go to a social worker who's just going to be there reading you and asking you how you do it and what do you think about that? Instead of having a social worker that feels comfortable enough to say, hey, let's have some coffee. Let's break it down and let's sit down and have more of a conversation where we can both participate and you feel heard and you feel validated through your experiences. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we'll let you go. And oh no, she wants to be part of this interview still. Yeah, I think that those are really, really strong points. But how do you feel? Do you feel sometimes that you are swimming upstream, as this clinician, professor, administrator of color, trying to make things better? just for an entire group of people, for the world, but also more specifically in your case, for people who are, under-resourced, communities that are under-resourced and people who are in positions of disadvantage to make it better for them. Do you feel sometimes that you're swimming upstream when those resources really aren't there allowed for you to do your work and everything else that
Yes.
we've talked about?
I mean, I am sure many of us have read and see the new budget that our government has put out. It's really cutting so many programs out. And we continue creating, they continue creating programs and funding mental health programs, but they giving more barriers and obstacles for these services to be delivered. So what ending happening now is that, yeah, you're giving more money, but who you giving the money to? And how is this money being managed? There's many people that they work day to day, paycheck to paycheck, and they cannot afford to go to therapy because they cannot afford to pay. And guess what? Insurance is not covering you. You have a high copay, and nobody's helping them. There is not one in the city to say, you know what, we have money to cover this clinic so they can offer. Give me a second. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, you were talking about the fact that people sometimes, they don't make enough money to be able to pay for therapy. And they also do not have the insurance that will pay for that also. So what it makes me think is, as a profession, and this should probably be the last question, we can spend the entire evening talking about these issues.
Before you get your last question, can you just give me a minute? Actually, just one bravado.
Oh, sure, go ahead. That's the balancing act.
I'm still learning the cries recognition. So now we're good.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, so what does it say about the profession? In other words, why is it that so many people are, well, it says about the profession and says about our society, that so many people who should be performing such great service to humanity feel that now they must be in private practice to make a good living. To the point where now there is significant lack of social workers across the country. It's not, I mean, across the country. When you look, for example, at New York, that has over 33,000, about 33,000 licensed social workers, is still lacking.
It's still lacking. Yeah. Well, I can tell you the work balance is a big impact on that. Burnout from organizations, not for profit, not being able to offer more to the employees because of the high need of productivity. It's extremely hard for people to go into jobs where they don't have flexibility to work from home. They don't have flexibility to have good health insurance, have babysitter services that will cover them for when they need to. But having your own private practice allows you to have work from home, allows you to have flexible schedule. It doesn't allow you to have health insurance, but it helps you with more freedom and more peace of mind. And everybody finds that a lot more attractive. A lot more attractive.
Right. But what that also does is that it leaves a big swath of people in communities, people that are not being served by social workers. So there continues to be an increasing need for social
Exactly.
workers I mean, everywhere across the country. And, there is someone, there's someone that, there are some social workers that are actually writing about childcare costs and what that does to people. And, there are so many basic things that we're not addressing as a nation. But what I'd like to do is to have you come back and talk more about what we do and how to address all of these challenges. But before you go, I'd like you to say something to future social workers, because there are many people who are in social work school now, not enough. There are many people who want to go to social work school, not enough. And there are many people who are just beginning their social work careers. I'd like you to just say something to them.
Sure. I can tell you that, so like I said earlier, social work is a beautiful treat of life. It has so many possibilities. It has so many things that you can do. And if you actually accomplish and finish and go for the last route, you can do whatever you want. You can have not only financial stability as a social worker, you don't need to have 3 jobs to have that. You don't have to. I know people be like, you need to work. No, you don't have to. You can find a very happy work-life balance. I have one, lucky enough. And you can make beautiful work in a community for people like yourself. You can inspire others. You can give back if you want. And if you don't want to, you can go corporate. It's fine, but you can't do that with a social work degree. You can do anything you want with a social work degree.
Right. I am tempted to ask you which of your roles you like best. Is it as a professor? Is it as a business owner, in your clinical practice? Or is it as the assistant vice president of your company? But I'm not going to ask that because it doesn't matter what. In all of those roles, you're still a social worker.
Yes.
And so I'd like to thank you for hanging out with, with me this evening. It has been a great time. I continue to be an admirer of your work. And, despite all of what you're doing, I think that my scheduler who scheduled you for this interview talked about how seamless it was, how much you cooperated in scheduling this. And so I'm really, really grateful to you. Thank you for this time. And let's continue to do the social work, that our country needs.
Yes, this is my life plan.
Thank you. Have a good evening. And thanks to the baby for joining us.
Yeah, she was good until the end. This is close to her bedtime. So she has
So
like this
good.
internal clock that it just doesn't work very well. But she
Right.
needs it 7 p.m.
And
Well,
one
thank
of
you.
the things, and one of the things that you have also shown us this evening is how important a nanny is. Yes, because your nanny left early because of the weather. So the baby came. And how often do we even think of
Yes.
appreciating nannies, and so I thank you very much for reminding us of that. And
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah, when she's like, I need to leave early, I was like, oh, okay. Well, thank you so much, O'Hara, and I'll see you soon, and I'll be happy to come back when my nanny's here.
absolutely, and we'll make sure of that.
Thank
So
you.
have a good evening.
You too.